Commission meeting. We're glad that you could join us here today. I have a few housekeeping items to go over before we begin. Please turn off your cell phone, all your personal communication devices. When there is an agenda item that includes a public hearing, please understand that the applicant will be allowed to speak first. After the applicant finishes, the public will be asked to speak. When called upon to speak, please approach the podium and state your name and address for the public record. You will have one opportunity per agenda item to speak unless a Plan Commission member requires clarification or wishes to ask you a question. After the public finishes speaking, the applicant will be asked if they have a final statement for the Plan Commission, and then the Plan Commission will take action on that agenda item. Thank you all for understanding. Now on to the agenda. First item on our agenda is roll call.
Mr. Lowenstein,
Here.
Mr. Bowen, Mr. Coulibaly,
Here.
Miss Davy,
Here.
Councilmember Ford,
Here.
Mr. Kiefer,
Here.
Miss Prop,
Here.
Miss Shireman,
Here.
Vice Chair Mitchell,
Here.
Chairman Perry.
Here.
9 present.
All right, and seeing that we do have a quorum, we'll have the approval of the September 20th, 22 minutes. We have a motion to approve the minutes.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and second. Any discussion on the minutes? Okay, having seen none, we can have a voice vote on the minutes. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? The minutes have passed. Okay, on to item number 1, which is a public hearing. It is a zone change from institutional district to institutional district with a plan development overlay, and approval of a general development plan and specific implementation plan for property located at 375 North Eagle Street. It's the Oshkosh Arena School District as the owner and applicant. Have there been any site inspections of that property by Plan Commission? I see at least 4.
Get them all? I think there's 5.
5, was there 5?
I got 3. I got Kathy, Margie, John.
Shireman
Oh,
and Mitchell.
okay.
All right. So I will accept the staff report as part of the record. Please present us the summary.
Thank you. So the subject site is Oshkosh West High School. It is bounded by Taft Ave, North Eagle Street, Southland Ave, and North Westfield Street. It is currently zoned institutional district. The surrounding area is primarily residential uses. So here's a view of the subject sites. The applicant is requesting a zone change to add a plan development overlay to the site, and that is intended to accommodate site improvements that will include new lighting and a new press box for the athletic field. So staff is supportive of that proposed rezone as it will assist in providing improvements for the site. So the applicant is proposing to install synthetic turf on the existing sports field used for freshman and JV football games and JV and varsity soccer games. The project also includes new lighting for the field and a new press box. And these plans were discussed at a Plan Commission workshop back in September. So on the screen here is a view of the press box. We'll have an overall height of 30 feet, where the code maximum for an accessory structure is 18 feet. So staff is supportive of a BSM to allow that increased height as it's needed to provide the visibility of the field from the press box. Plans also include installation of 4 new 70-foot tall light poles to provide lighting for the field. And the 70-foot height is well in excess of the 20 feet permitted within the institutional district. And this is similar to a project recently done at North High School for their football and soccer field. And the increased height is intended to take advantage of the more focused light and illuminate more directly onto the playing surface than shorter poles, which reduces the amount of light spillage onto adjacent properties. So staff is recommending that this BSM be offset with a minimum of 250 tall or medium tree street frontage landscaping points along North Westfield Street, and that is to help mitigate the visual impact of the increased light fixture height and the press box. Also, staff has been in contact with the city forester, and there's potential for adding some street trees along the frontage within the terrace, and the species would be determined by what type of plantings go on the private side. The photometric plan is compliant with city ordinance as they are not exceeding 1 foot candle at the right-of-way line. And with that, staff recommends approval of the rezone and the GDP SIP with the findings and conditions in your staff report.
Okay, Plan Commission, are there any technical questions to the staff on this agenda item? Ms. Prop?
Item 3, 250 points for trees. Justin has raised several questions about trees. How many trees is that?
It depends on the species they go with, but they go with like a tall tree, overstory deciduous tree, that would be about 5 trees. If they go with medium trees, it'd be more than that.
5 trees or a few more for medium?
Yes.
Along the entire length of the athletic complex, or all the way to Taft, or what?
I think we'd want them in the general vicinity of the football field, because the new light poles are right here and right here, and the press box is here, so we'd want them kind of screening those new poles.
Okay, all right, thank you.
And that number is kind of consistent with what we did on the Oshkosh North request. So to kind of where that number came up from, it was the same as what we did with Oshkosh North.
Mr. Mitchell.
I appreciate all of the time that you spend answering my questions the last day or two. I'm left kind of confused, and I think maybe it's because you've been through this a lot more, I'm just not understanding something. When I read the planned development ordinance, it says for an SIP that, well, I'll go back. It says for a planned development, a GDP, that it requires a landscape plan. And then later on in the SIP process, it says it requires a very formalized landscape plan. And if I thought in your email you said the reason why that was not being required is because city staff decided to waive it.
So as I mentioned, per the applicability section of our landscape code, there is no required landscape plan for this project. Nothing in the code triggers that says they must add landscaping. The plan development overlay gives staff the ability to waive filing requirements. It has always been the process of the city to waive filing requirements for things that have no applicability. We don't make applicants provide a blank plan. So requiring a landscape plan that showed no landscaping really doesn't provide any benefit to the city or plan commission, and puts cost on the applicant providing a plan that includes nothing.
So like down the sequence, the ordinance for the plan development says, yes, you have to have a landscape plan, which then you get routed to the landscape plan, and it says because of what's happening here, there's no landscaping that's required, and so that's the rationale.
Correct.
Got it. Okay, that makes sense, and I can get to conversation later, but.
Great, thank you. Any other technical questions for staff from the Plan Commission? Any other technical questions? Okay, seeing none from the Plan Commission, this is a public hearing, so I am going to open the public hearing. And is the applicant here, and do they wish to make a statement? Do you wish to make a statement for the board or commission?
Good evening. Thank you for your time. Just briefly, I appreciate the opportunity to address you. You've seen the plan. This is a turf field that we're trying to bring the same concept over from North High School that we had just finished, really to try to address a lot of the spring sports, the equality needs that we're having, trying to get girls soccer onto the field, trying to get club sports back to that field. We're having difficulty getting athletes out onto those fields in the springtime. And then as a result of building with Ville Phillips, we've lost one athletics field. So that's kind of the driver behind what we're doing by trying to shift from natural turf to synthetic turf in this particular area. And then of course we're adding the lights to try to stretch out the evening just a little bit and trying to stack additional athletic programs onto that area. So I just want to give you a little background as to the why we're doing something with this particular space. But if you have any questions of us, of the school system, specifically to this design, I'd be happy to answer that. Yes, ma'am.
If we were to ask for more landscaping, would that be acceptable?
I spoke to the athletic director specifically with regard to that space along Westfield. And so that is the only, his concern is that is the only green space he has. Directly to the east is a soccer field. Directly to the north is a soccer/practice football field. So when they have track, their tents and everything gets set up along Westfield in that grassy area. And then when we have special events, we have Care Days, which is a special ed event in late May, early June. They do a lot of staging in that area. So I think anything that we do to start to impact that area is going to cause some concern to them.
Okay, tents and all this activity would butt right up to the fence then?
Not necessarily. It depends on the size of the meat. I can't speak to exactly how much area that they're going to use. I'm just pointing out that that's the only green space that they would have that you could kind of call a flex space, if you will. I think given what the city has asked for, we're willing to go with taller trees. We're willing to go with more of a medium-sized tree. I'm very curious what the forestry department may come up with relative to terrace plantings. I think those are all great ideas.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
Are there any other questions of the applicant? Thank you. Since this is a public hearing, I'll now request any additional public comment from those in attendance. Is there any public comment on this agenda item from those in attendance? Once again, any public comment from those in attendance? Okay, having seen none, I'm going to close the public hearing. Since nobody spoke, I really don't need to have a closing statement from the applicant unless you want to give one. So commission action is upon you.
Motion to adopt the findings and recommendations as stated in the staff report?
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion on this motion from the Plan Commission? Mr. Mitchell?
All right. My main concern is on page 4, the back of the shed being placed relatively high, higher than our zone, our code require or allows, with that being the back in a residential neighborhood. Now, it's not surprising that there's no neighbors that are here. Those are all rentals, and notice doesn't go out to the actual tenants. So nobody that lives directly across from this that will be impacted actually receives notice, which may be a concern to look at for future outreach. But my interest in this is trying to conceal that as much as possible. I promise you that other neighborhoods that are owner occupied would be responsive, similar to the folks on Oshkosh Avenue, when somebody wanted to convert a dilapidated residential into a commercial. They were outspoken on that, and we supported them. Nobody wants that in their backyard or their front yard. And so my interest in bringing up some of the questions was to try and have landscaping that would conceal that as much as possible. I think that image that you're looking at right there is maybe a shadow. I'm hoping that's a shadow and not a paved area to the left of the press box. If that is in fact just a shade and not paved, because I was under the idea we weren't expanding pavement, so if that is just a shadowy grass area, I mean, I would love to see 6 or so evergreen trees, arborvitae put there. That would be 240 points. And then, a handful of trees along the rest of it, sufficiently spaced out to enable tents or whatever you need. And the idea of the shade trees, which are worth 50 points each, they would be tall enough where they would likely provide welcome. And my kids run cross country, and if you don't have tents, everybody hovers under the few trees that are present. So, I mean, that would be a welcomed addition for purposes like that as well. So, I mean, my interest would be to see something closer to 540 points, which would be six shade trees and then 6 arborvitae, but the arborvitae specifically located to try and provide a screening for the press box from behind. I know that would require an amendment, but before doing so, just curious what other folks' thoughts were.
Any other discussion on the motion, Ms. Davy?
Having seen the photos that Justin had provided us with all the other area, similar facilities, frankly, I was really impressed with everybody else's, and the fact that they do provide some shade. We all know that's much better for the environment, and it's going to help cool everything down. And I guess I would love to see a row of trees all the way along there. I don't know that having trees precludes putting up tents. I mean, yeah, it does. If you have trees, you can't put tents under them.
Not the way they pack tents.
Oh, so and I haven't been there to see that, so my kids were on the other side of town. So were yours.
I know tents.
It's okay, Carl.
And you put a bunch of trees in there, it screws up the tents.
Yeah,
It really does.
well,
But, and that I see what we're weighing here, but
Right.
it does make good tent.
Okay.
okay.
There you go, Carl.
It seems like there's adequate space too between the fence and the sidewalk, before you get to the terrace even.
The tents are inside the fence, right?
Right, I would
Okay.
think so.
So,
But something like that I would argue too, or, along with what Justin's saying, that, putting some landscaping along, some trees along that area, would be a nice addition to the area, having, been through there many, many times and gone to many events here. I mean, it'd make it very, much nicer, and doesn't look like you're not gonna preclude anything going on in that open grass field between the track and the fence, so, on either side of the stands. If we did something like that.
right, Councilmember Ford?
Can I invite the applicant back up?
Yes, yes, you may.
Come back up. I'd love to. May I ask them a question? Is that-
Yes, you may.
See, I was in charge. You gotta be nice to him.
Thank you for asking.
Yeah, you're very welcome. What's your reaction to that plan? I mean, with that,
With which part?
putting Arborvitae up directly behind that press box there.
Oh, I understand. I understand the thought process. That's certainly something that we could take a look at. There is some electrical, so we'd have to make sure we've got, proper setback from the electrical. But the one thing that would make me, I think a limited amount of arborvitae might make sense. I think the concern would be, particularly if you're going with larger shade trees, that fence is to the edge of the press box is 28 feet. So if you're going with a large canopy tree, you got to be a little cautious. You're not going to get a tall tree up against the press box because you're going to have a canopy that's going to be growing probably within 6 to 8 feet of that press box, perhaps within 10.
And there would be flexibility, obviously, with what specifically you're putting on there, but there would be. That's not a paved area, I guess.
It is not paved.
Okay.
It's concrete underneath the bleacher structure. It would be per plan concrete underneath the press box only.
Okay.
I think it's just
Thank you.
a shadow you see there.
It's a shadow.
Right.
Correct.
Thank you.
I have a follow-up question as well. So behind the press box is frequently an area that schools or other institutions of learning will use to put their mascot or some other type of identifier as it, because it's a big, wide area of nothing. Has there been any talks of plans of doing that kind of thing? And if so, does that fall under the sign ordinance?
There has not been.
I'm thinking that arborvitae, if there was a plan to do that, would conceal that, which would go against the purpose of having a mascot or school name or something up there.
Excuse me.
And then, do you know, would that preclude them from, would that be a sign or would that just be decoration?
It would likely be a sign.
Any other commission discussion on this motion? Ms.
Sort of-
Steierman?
Sort of along the same lines, so there hasn't been also any talk about using that for advertisement?
No.
Revenue generation?
No.
Anything like that? Sponsorship?
No, this will look very much like North High School if you've had an opportunity to drive past North High School. It's really likely to be an identical press box. I think it's really probably more attractive than the bleacher assembly itself. It's more modern, it's got a curved roof, it's got a nice color to it. So I don't feel that that press box is going to detract from that structure. I think it really completes that overall assembly, in my opinion.
Mr. Lowenstein?
I don't know if it's a technical question, but it seems to me that using the terrace is a really good kind of solution, but we don't really know what the forester would do. I mean, can you require the forester to do something and say, hey, put some nice big trees in the terrace? It's a good distance, it preserves the green space on the property, and still would be screening?
So, I'll let Brian handle it because he talked to the city forester.
Yeah, so the city forester did say that they will be willing to put in some plantings along in the terrace this spring for their plans, but they were going to base that on what is on the approved landscape plan for the private side of the terrace. So that's going to kind of dictate what they're going to do.
Yeah, we could not, through this plan development, require the city forester to put in plantings, but he did agree there should be plantings in the terrace there, and he would look at getting some added. He wanted to kind of look at complementing, what's on the private side, what goes in the terrace, and making sure it's a cohesive, thought-out plan.
Mr. Mitchell?
Follow up on that, is there a way to quantify that where we could say require 540, of which, X number would be the arborvitae located in that, but from the remainder, could be subtracted, 30 points per tree that the city forestry determines is possible along the terrace during that, or through that section? So that way there's not a need to overdo it, and a balance of.
Trying to think of the legal ramifications of writing a condition that way. It's probably something we could work out. If we leave the condition, that final landscape plan as approved by community development, it gives us a little bit of extra flexibility. And if the indication from Plan Commission and the intent by Plan Commission is you want 540 points total, that's what you care about. You want to make sure there's at least that. We can probably work with the city forester to make sure between the school district's plannings and their plannings we get to that number. We need to have an enforceable condition, so we want to remove as much subjectivity as we can from it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, okay.
Any other commission discussion on this motion? Ms. Prop?
Just a question. I don't fully understand what basically doubling the amount of landscaping would do. So 540 or whatever arbitrary number is not something I'm not saying I'm uncomfortable with it, but I just want to make sure that it's not so much that it overwhelms the school district with what they need.
So
But
looking
yet
at
we have more. I mean,
Yeah.
I think we definitely need more.
looking at Justin's math, I think 540. Excuse me. If 6 of them were done as tall evergreens, now I'm all choked up. Those are 40 points each. 240 points, leaving 300 points of landscaping. As if done as shade trees, would equate to 6 trees. So you're looking at a dozen trees if shade trees were the chosen species. I see Mr. Garrock walking towards us, so I'm sure he has some comments about the amount of utilities that may be in that terrace and the ability to add trees.
So as I was listening to this discussion, I pulled up the GIS, and back in the 60s, the school district and the city were one entity, if I'm not mistaken.
Correct.
So there's actually public storm sewer, not in an easement, on school district property, outside the right-of-way, behind the, where the press box is located. So adding significant amount of landscaping over the top of that would not be very beneficial long-term for that utility.
I'm also aware that the forester does not like to do that. The newer forester does not like to do that at all.
So again, not that you can't do something in there, adding a significant amount of landscaping in that area may be difficult to even get it installed based on the utilities that are there.
Thank you. Mr. Mitchell?
I was hoping to just see what, I think he's trying to bring it up. I mean, as he's looking, I feel like that data, if it wasn't already in our in this overview, should have been useful. I don't know, does that impact anything else?
Of their current plan, it does not look like it would impact the press box improvement, but it's going to be close. And I'm looking. They probably have enough room. I'm trying to match up the two dimensions.
When you go south, I feel that there is another tree along this line. Yeah, that's a tree.
Looks like it's a tree.
Yeah, on the photo I have, it is a tree.
Yep.
You can see it on the
it doesn't.
view in the screen
That
too.
must be
Yeah.
springtime. Yeah.
So there is.
So meaning they can fit.
But I think the relevant question here is directly behind the press box might not be sufficient to get trees planted. To the north and to the south, where there's more room
Right.
up with the bleachers, we probably can get in. But if that press box sits here, we can't plant directly over that.
So maybe,
Basically, what I think the plan is that we'll be a few feet, 8, 10 feet, whatever it is, beyond that current bleacher area, which should not merely affect the utility, but now trying to add additional plantings in that area directly behind that could be very difficult to do.
Thank you, Justin.
Thank you. Ms. Davy?
am I reading this correctly, though, in that there are no utilities between the storm sewer and the street? So the terrace would be fair game, the other side of the fence would be fair game for trees?
There does not appear to be any public utilities. Does not mean there is not AT&T, electric, private utilities.
Ha. They don't give you those for your little maps, huh?
No, we have the public.
Any other commission discussion on this motion? Mr. Mitchell?
So I'd like to make a amendment or a proposal for an amendment. And I'm doing so, I think, with missing information. Justin saying that it may be difficult. I don't really know because we don't have a landscape plan. It hasn't really been looked at yet. We're voting. So I'm going to put something together, and if I can get your comment on it. But I propose amending to 540 landscape points, including 6 evergreen trees located between Westfield and the press box.
Second.
That if we propose that and then staff comes back and says that's not possible because of utility.
Staff can't.
I'm saying afterwards, if the utility is there, or is there language that we can put in that?
I would ask you put it in your motion, because without it in your amended condition, I have no authority to change it after it's approved. So
Sure. So then, in parentheses or whatnot, unless infeasible due
subject
to.
to final determination of utility conflicts, or I can help wordsmith it for you. But
By the city forester.
yep.
Well, by
This is gonna be Public Works weighing in on if there's any room left there to put trees. And I'd rather get as much detail as I can out of you. And I'll draw on the map the best I can. If we can't put them, theoretically, the press box goes here, and we can't put them here. If we put them north and south of the press box to our best ability, would that still meet your end goal?
Very much so.
So I think if we can amend the condition to 540 landscape points, with 6 of those being evergreen, tall evergreen trees, with the goal of providing them in proximity to the press box, subject to final utility locations. Something that sound about
Perfect.
Ms. Shireman?
Justin, my question is for you. Isn't part of having the landscaping to block the back of the press box? So if you have it north and south, you're not taking care of that.
Sure. So think about the angle of all of the residents on Westfield is ideally you would have it shield from all of them, but if you absolutely can't, you can't help those maybe 2 rental units that are directly across, but you would still be able to benefit everybody else.
Got it.
I mean,
No,
I'm brainstorming with you here because this is the first I've heard of the utilities being there as well.
Okay, just for the record, we have a motion that is on the floor. We have a proposed amendment to the motion, which, can you read it back the way you've written it so that we,
Are you sure?
yeah.
Okay, I'm sorry if this is wrong. Okay, amend to 540 landscape points with 6 evergreen trees with proximity to press box with subject to utility feasibility.
Okay, so we have an amendment to the motion. Do we have a second to the amendment to the motion?
Second.
Okay, Ms. Davies seconds. We have commission discussion on the amended motion. Okay, Mr. Lowenstein.
I'm going to say I'm against this motion because it then requires all the trees to be on the school district's property. And that's where, and I think that's going to crowd the space for the use for students. And so although we can't write a code to make this happen, I really think the better place for this extra screening is on the outside of the fence and in the terrace. That wouldn't impact student ability to enjoy their meets in this territory. So I'm going to oppose this amendment.
Any other commission discussion? I'm also going to add for the record that I will be opposing this as well. I do not believe arborvitae will even get tall enough to make an impact on the stark whiteness of this addition, and I think that the school would do better by even putting something more spirited on the back of that when they have the opportunity. Any other discussion? Okay, we're going to vote on the item with the amendment, and we're going to do a voice vote. A roll call vote, please.
First, we need to vote on the amendment.
First, we need to vote on the amendment. Roll call vote, please.
Mr. Lowenstein,
No.
Mr. Coulibaly,
Aye.
Miss Davy,
Aye.
Councilmember Ford,
Aye.
Mr. Kiefer,
No.
Miss Prop,
No.
Miss Shireman,
No.
Vice Chair Mitchell,
Aye.
Chairman Perry.
No. So by my count, I believe the amendment fails.
That's my
So we will now go to the original item with the motion on the floor, which is to approve as recommended in the staff report. And we will do a roll call vote for that as well.
Mr. Lowenstein,
Aye.
Mr. Coulibaly,
Aye.
Miss Davy,
Aye.
Councilmember Ford,
Aye.
Mr. Kiefer,
Aye.
Miss Prop,
Aye.
Miss Shireman,
Aye.
Vice Chair Mitchell,
No.
Chairman Perry.
Aye.
Motion carried 8-1.
Thank you. Item number 2 on our agenda is a specific implementation plan for a commercial development at 2101 West 9th Avenue. Associated Bank is the owner and Braveheart Development. Mao and Associates is the applicant. Have there been any site inspections by the Plan Commission of this property? Ms. Davy, Mr. Mitchell, Ms. Shireman, Mr. Lowenstein,
Mr. Kiefer.
Mr. Kiefer.
That all, 5? I thought I saw 5 again.
That is 5. Okay, I will accept the staff report as part of the record. Please present your summary.
Thank you. So the subject site is located at the southwest corner of West 9th Avenue and South Washburn Street. At last week's Common Council meeting, a zone change was approved to add a plan development overlay to the site, so it's now a zone SMUPD. A general development plan was also approved at the meeting for a drive-through coffee shop. Here's a view of the existing site. So the applicant is proposing a drive-through coffee shop, including a patio area on the south side of the building and 15 parking stalls. It will have access from West 9th Avenue and South Washburn Street. The applicant is requesting base standard modifications for reduced setbacks along West 9th Avenue to about 1.5 feet, along South Washburn Street to about 4.5 feet. Also requesting BSMs for the drive-through lane to about 7.5 feet on the along the west property line, and about 1.5 feet on the south property line from the drive lane and the dumpster enclosure. Staff is supportive of the requested BSMs for the reduced setbacks, as the unique lot configuration and the abnormally wide public right-of-way frontage results in hardships to meet those required setbacks. The applicant is also requesting a BSM for reduced drive-through stacking length in front of the order station to about 40 feet, where code requires 100 feet. And staff is supportive of that, as well as it has 2 drive-through lanes, will allow for stacking of 4 vehicles to eliminate vehicle stacking issues. Here's the proposed dumpster enclosure. It'll be 6 feet tall and have a concrete masonry unit exterior. So the applicant is requesting a BSM for that exterior, as code requires it to be wood or a material used on the building. So according to the applicant, the CMU exterior was chosen as it's sturdier than wood and will require less maintenance. Staff is not supportive of that, though, as there really appears to be no hardship to necessitate them using material that's not permitted by code. Here's the proposed pylon sign. It is 30 feet tall. They are proposing a, I think it's on the landscape plan, they're proposing a 14-foot setback from the pylon sign, where code requires a 25-foot setback. So they will need a BSM for that reduced setback. Staff is also supportive of that reduced setback for the sign, as the site constraints limit the ability to meet the setback requirement. The building elevations show wall signage on each facade, and it will be within the maximum of 1 square foot per linear foot for all signage. Here's the landscape plan. It is meeting building foundation landscaping points and paved area landscaping points. However, they will need to add trees at the driveway entrances to the site per paved area requirements. They are deficient on street frontage landscaping. Their original plan had shown tall trees to meet that requirement along the property line. However, it appears that there is insufficient space for those tall trees to grow without extending into the public right-of-way, as there's a limited setback area for those trees to grow. So they resubmitted a different plan just showing shrubs along the property line. However, they're under the code requirement for street frontage landscaping. Staff is recommending a BSM to allow some of that street frontage landscaping to be placed further than 10 feet from the public right-of-way line, as there is just insufficient space along the public right-of-way to meet that street frontage point landscaping requirement. And we will work with the applicant to include some smaller plantings along that frontage, with the remainder of the required street frontage points being provided elsewhere on the site. Here are the building elevations. So they are meeting the 50% Class 1 material requirements on the front elevations facing 9th Ave and Washburn Street. And they're using stone and glazing to meet that 50% Class 1 requirement. They're requesting a BSM to have less than 50% Class 1 materials on the drive-through side, which is the west side. So they're showing 35% there. So staff is supportive of a BSM to allow that reduction on that facade, as they are exceeding the 50% Class 1 requirement on the street-facing facades, with all 3 facades combined being at about 53%, which exceeds that 50% minimum, and the rear south elevation is exempt from that requirement. So with that, staff recommends approval of the SIP with the findings and conditions in your staff report.
Okay, thank you. Technical questions from the Plan Commission to the staff. Mr. Kiefer?
So where is the garbage, this dumpster right down there? Okay. And what's acceptable materials for garbage?
Has to be wood or else a material used on the exterior of the main building.
So typically what we're looking there for is kind of consistency of development matching the building.
Any other technical questions for the staff? Mr. Mitchell?
There's no concerns about a left turn out of the southern entrance to the site. Crossing right after the roundabout.
If I recall correctly, when we looked at this, it's just outside. I think it's, looking at Justin, yeah, Justin's nodding his head. It's just past that, so it shouldn't be of a concern.
Other technical questions? Okay, seeing none, I am going to allow public comment for this item, and so Is there a statement from the applicant? Does the applicant want to make a statement on this particular item? It doesn't need to. Any other public wish to comment on this item? Okay, having seen none, I'm going to close the public comment period, and I'm not going to ask for a closing statement from the applicant. So commission, the action is on you.
To adopt the findings and recommendations as stated in the staff report.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Is there any commission discussion on this motion? Any commission discussion? All right, we're going to have a roll call vote, please.
Mr. Lowenstein,
Aye.
Mr. Kulabali,
Aye.
Miss Davy,
Aye.
Councilmember Ford,
Aye.
Mr. Kiefer,
Aye.
Prop,
Aye.
Miss Shireman,
Aye.
Vice Chair Mitchell,
Aye.
Chairman Perry.
Aye.
Motion carried 9-0.
All right, item number 3 has been removed from our agenda, will be moved to the November 1st Plan Commission meeting. So the next item up is adjournment. We have a motion and a second for adjournment. We will have a voice vote on it. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? We are adjourned.
All right.
Oh, we need to have these late meetings more often.
workshops tonight.